Hello and welcome to All Things Philosophic, brought to you by atthesymposium.org. Today will be the start of a 52-week series on the discipline of philosophy. This will be the first of the series. Today the subject matter will be, what is philosophy? An introduction. Right, so our starting question again is, what is philosophy? Well, if we break down the etymology, Phile means love, and Sophia means wisdom. So if you put those together, we have love and wisdom. So the love of wisdom is philosophy. That is its etymological root, though there's more. Now, when people commonly think about philosophy, they have certain ideas. These are some of the common notions that people have when thinking about philosophy. Okay, so philosophy is often or commonly thought of as the love of wisdom, which it is, and we just covered that. The love or exercise of critical thinking, it can be that too. Engaging in deep questions about life and existence, it's certainly that, yes. The use of imagination, that happens in philosophy when you're trying to figure out creative ways to imagine things or to approach different arguments or conceptions of the world and human life, etc. In analysis of an argument and debate, that certainly happens in philosophy. A lofty or romantic intellectual exercise. Now that is something that that happens in philosophy as well. Depending on your perspective, you might think that's a good or bad thing, but we'll get into that later on. But there's more here. Philosophy isn't just those things. Philosophy is a legacy of rigorous thought, debate, and analysis about beings and the world that they inhabit. Alright, so philosophy is just not the thinking, just not the lofty romantic ideas, it's not just debate. Philosophy has a history of discourse. So there's a history and the way it unfolds. There's a discussion about things, a long-held discussion in most areas about certain subjects and topics, right? And within that history and that discourse, that history also has a method. So there's different methods, and we'll go through that later and cover some of the prominent philosophical methods. Then the history also has a style. So because there's different methods, there's different camps, and those camps have different styles of how they approach questions and how they engage with their methodology. And central themes and ideas, right? So there's central themes and ideas that are more frequently addressed in certain fields and others, and that'll all correspond to in part their history, their method, and their style. And we will cover that more and more as this course goes on. But this is a really important point to drive home, and is in part one of the biggest things in this first lesson here, is that philosophy, again, is not just, if we go back here, it's not just these things that people commonly think about it as, especially this last one, the lofty, romantic intellectual exercise. It is an intellectual exercise, but again, it's a discipline with a history, with a methodology. You do not want to get philosophizing mixed in with actually being a philosopher or doing proper philosophy. What we're talking about here is the academic philosophy, and that's different than just philosophizing, So two people sitting at a cafe pondering the meaning of life, they're philosophizing, yes, but doesn't mean that they're actually philosophers or doing philosophy. To do philosophy would be to, again, engage with the history of the discourse, engage with the method, and engage with the style. So it's very important to keep that in mind here. So going forward, what are some of the basic questions that we might ask ourselves in everyday life, right? So some of the philosophic questions that we might ask every day, even though we're not actually doing philosophy in the professional sense, let's say. What is the meaning of life? Something that we've all likely asked ourselves many times over, might still be asking ourselves, why am I here? That's another one that might take the same form. What do I value? Another important question we're probably always reevaluating: why does the universe or Earth exist? Okay, it's another grand question. Why does it continue to exist? So why does the universe or the Earth continue to exist? That is, and that treads more and sort of into science or the philosophy of science. Is there a God? That's another question, right? That's very prominent. Seems to have captured the attention of all peoples, of all civilizations and whatnot. Is there an afterlife? That's another one that seems to catch the attention of all people, of all cultures, and all time periods. Moving forward. Now, how would a philosopher ask those same questions? Okay, so this is just giving a little bit of an insight in how the difference in how a philosopher would ask these questions, again, depending on their discipline, right? So what is the meaning of existence, right? Instead of asking what is the meaning of life, well, more technically, they might ask, what is the meaning of existence? If you're asking, why am I here? What maybe someone that was into deontology or someone that is into theology might ask, what is my teleological purpose? A teleological purpose, and we'll go through terms and areas of study in the next lesson or two, but a teleological purpose would just be something that addresses what my ends and aims are, what my goals are. So that kind of question is very prominent in the theological realm. Now, what is the ontological significance of the universe, right? Instead of just asking why does this universe exist, so that question framed in that way, what is the ontological significance of the universe, is something that some philosophers in the phenomenological area might ask the question in that sort of way. The philosophers that do phenomenology would ask that kind of question. And also maybe even the philosophy of science, though they would not ask it maybe in that sense, they'd ask it maybe more in a concrete sense. Is there an omnipotent being? That's again something that a theologian might ask that question in that sort of way. So that gives you just a sense of how we have common questions that likely all of us have asked, but there are different ways to ask those questions depending on what field of philosophy you're in and how we would approach those questions. And again, we'll go through that more in depth as this unfolds. Again, see, these questions will be approached differently based on the traditions, right? So that's another thing. So not just because of their areas or their subcategories, but also because of the two major traditions. So there's two major philosophic traditions, and that's the Continental Tradition and the Analytic Tradition. Now, the Continental Tradition is what we most know of philosophy. So that's Plato, Aristotle, etc. Most of the philosophers that you might have heard of throughout your life were most likely the Continental Tradition. Now, so the Continental Tradition comprises most of philosophy, as I just stated, and it's much more literary than the Analytic, right? So the Analytic is more logical, and so cover in this next statement, it's not as focused on the formal logic as much as reasoning about the world, existence, society, and the human condition, right? So again, the Continentals is what's used more. It's more literary. It's more explorative. It's less formal and logical. The Analytic Tradition, however, would be basically the exact opposite. So it relies on logic sets and argument layouts, the use of if and only if statements, or IFF statements as it's abbreviated. Here's an example. If P then Q, or S can be true if and only if P is true and Q is false, right? So those are the kinds of arguments and logic sets that we're going to use in the analytic tradition. So what's to come? All right, so the rest of the month, what we're going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about vocabulary. We're going to be talking about doing philosophy, the method of philosophy, and then we're going to talk about the major areas of philosophy and the major figures. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, this is All Things Philosophic, brought to you by atthesymposium.org. Thank you.